move on to something more serious, because the whole point, or one of the reasons for this debate, was foreign policy, international affairs.
Yes.
And of course, top of the agenda, at the moment anyway, is Afghanistan. Let's hear what they had to say about that.
I think if you put soldiers into harm's way, you either do the job properly or you don't do it at all. So if we ever take that decision again, let's make sure we've got the right equipment, the right strategy, so that they can come back, having done the job we've asked them to do with their heads held high, knowing they've done the job well.
You know, every week I get a report, sometimes every day, of terrorist plots, most of them which arise in the Afghanistan-Pakistan area, and we have got to deal with. So to keep the streets safe in Britain, we have to take on Al-Qaeda wherever it is.
If you look at future operations like that, we have to learn from the mistakes of the past. We've got to make sure that we plan properly. We've got to make sure we never send our troops into battle again without the proper equipment, without the proper helicopters. We have to think through not just what we're doing militarily, but actually, is the aid there? Are we helping these people? Do we have a political strategy for how we're going to get out of that country once we've tried to make it safe with our allies? I think in the case of Afghanistan, far too many of those questions weren't answered. And even now, while I support what we're doing and I want it to work, I still worry we're not doing enough to get the political situation right in Afghanistan.
Well, David Cameron basically asking a lot of questions in his answer to the question about Afghanistan. Did you detect any clear water between the three men?
No, this is the problem. Nick Clegg missed the opportunity here.
But this is his weakest area, isn't it?
Yeah, but it was his big opportunity of the night to really make a splash. If he'd have said, pull the troops out of Afghanistan now. If he's going to be critical of the Afghanistan policy, which he is, and Cameron and Brown support it, he should make it clear that there's a difference. He should have said something dramatic. He should have said something bold. And we got into a position where they all look roughly the same, criticism of the operation, supporting the troops. Many British people want those troops brought back now, and I think Nick Clegg should have associated himself with it to make that distinction.
Nikki, I mean, you basically concentrate on body language, but the way they delivered their messages tonight, and especially that very important message or serious message about Afghanistan, how did you feel that went down?
For me, I still believe that I was hugely admiring of Nick Clegg last week. And yet this week, to me, he just seemed to lack substance and gravitas. So I almost saw him as the boy wonder who was, you know, and even Gordon Brown, I think, a couple of times said, no, you've got this wrong, hang on. You know, he was very patronising to Nick. And I think that this debate showed his lack of substance, his lack of gravitas, his lack of experience was very evident.
He goes back to being a contender, in other words, rather than, you know, perhaps a
I don't
favourite.
think he was quite as amazing tonight, and I think he did everything in the same way, but he didn't seem to be enjoying it as much as he did last night.
Okay.
Whereas David Cameron looked so much more at ease.
Last week, you mean? But yeah,
yes.
I agree. David Cameron, the only Eurosceptic on view tonight. Would that be fair or not?
Yeah, so he is. Gordon Brown is not really a Eurosceptic, but not as keen on Europe as Clegg. I think Clegg handled the European issue quite well. It's potentially weak for him. Because most people don't agree with his position. But I think he was quite forceful on that and quite clear. Yeah. And he did what all politicians should do if they've got an unpopular issue. Be absolutely frank about it and take your position and be bold.
Gordon Brown sending out a few missiles. David, you're anti-Europe. Nick Clegg, you're anti-American.
Yes, that's what he wanted to do. Again, he wants to establish himself as Mr. Security. The others, he said actually during this program constantly. He said, "David, you're a risk," and "Nick, you're a risk." He painted the others as risky. So it's safety first, paterfamilias with Gordon Brown. That's the policy. Okay. I think it's the right one for Labour. They don't have a lot of other things going for them, but they have people dividing their opposition now.
Now, one of the issues today, one of the issues in the news today is this new problems for the Vatican, an apology, and a bishop has resigned as well. And this was one of the questions in the debate, and it was answered, I think, first by Nick Clegg.
My wife is, Miriam is Catholic, my children are being brought up in her faith, so I have a little bit of an insight into the immense feelings of anguish in the Catholic community here and elsewhere. I do welcome the Pope's visit, but I hope by the time he does visit there is a greater recognition that there has been terrible, terrible suffering.
So the Church has got to deal with these problems, and it's got to make sure that there is an open and clean confession about what has happened, and that we help those people who've been put into difficulty by this abuse. But, you know, I welcome the Pope's visit to Britain.
But do I agree with everything the Pope says? No, I don't agree with him about contraception. I don't agree with him about homosexuality. And I think the Catholic Church has got some very, very serious work to do to unearth and come to terms with some of the appalling things that have happened. And they need to do that.
Well, so live reaction there to events today. Stephen first.
Difficult question for all of them. The Catholic vote in Britain is large, and it's mainly Labour, so you don't want to alienate the Catholic vote. And if you had said, for instance, you weren't in favour of the Pope visiting, I think that would have been the story of the night, and that would have dominated everything. So, very difficult question for all of them. They faffed it, of course. You know, they fudged it, as they always do, these very difficult questions. But I think, again, they played safe. I mean, I'd call this the safety-first debate. I think you're going to get fireworks next week on laying people off and unemployment and all that. But this week, I think it was safety first. And that was a typical example of how they played safe.
OK, now, after last week, Nikki Owen got it exactly right about who'd won the debate, and she said Nick Clegg was way in front, and so it proved with the polls. Well, Nikki, you were right again. We've just had a snap from UK YouGov poll. David Cameron has just been judged the winner of this week's debate. But reaction from you on that last piece we heard about the Pope?
I think that particular question was brilliantly handled. David Cameron seemed completely comfortable. For me, that was the defining question that started to really get public support. I think he did it really, really well. Nick Clegg, unfortunately, I felt was a very contrived answer. It was kind of insincere. If you look at his gestures, his eye contact, it just seemed to lack sincerity. And Gordon Brown as well, I felt that it was very insincere. So David Cameron, you felt he was absolutely speaking the truth from the heart, and it was what he really, really believed. So yes, from me slagging him off last week, I think he did extremely well this week.
Nikki, I'm going to sort of hold back my absolute praise of you, because we're hearing another poll has put Nick Clegg the winner.
Okay.
So if there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. So we'll find out more. But I think Cameron came out a lot more strongly. Now, in the first round, we had Nick Clegg as the outright winner. In the second round, we've had perhaps a draw for first, but it's more likely that Cameron has a very strongly improved position. Next week, well, the debate.